I would like to talk to you about Steve Mnuchin. Now, Steve Mnuchin, of course, is the Treasury Secretary of the United States, former Goldman Sachs senior executive, former booter-outer of widows in foreclosed homes, predatory banker in the mortgage business, former lots of bad things, really. But I want to talk to you about something very specific about Steve Mnuchin and the grift that he has pulled on the American people in helping Donald Trump sell the so-called Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Now, this act, according to Steve Mnuchin, was going to return tax money to the American people. It was also going to, as the name implies, create jobs. Now, Steve Mnuchin didn't just say that once. He said it over and over and over again. Let me give you some quotes from last year when this thing was being pushed through Congress. September 27th of 2017, he said, the president outlined a framework that will fuel job creation, higher wages, and economic growth. He said these reforms will lead to record high employment, more investment in education and innovation, and more manufacturing right here in America. That was September 27th. October 11th of last year, we are working with Congress to pass historic tax relief and reform that will invigorate American manufacturing. And he was speaking to truckers, ensure that many truckers today will have plenty of American-made goods to deliver. He also said November 5th, with a tax code made for Americans, we'll see more made in America. December 20th, today Congress delivered tax cuts to middle-income families. I congratulate the House and Senate for passing this historic legislation, which will usher in higher wages and more jobs for American workers. January 8th, companies across the country are announcing additional hiring and workforce investments. February 5th, hardworking men and women across the country are receiving bonuses, higher wages, new jobs, and enhanced benefits. Get all that? What Steve Mnuchin has been telling the American people is that the tax cuts pushed through by Donald Trump are great because companies are going to take all this money that is flowing back to America's corporations, and America's corporations far and away are the big beneficiaries of this deal. They're going to take all that money and they're going to create jobs and raise wages and make life better for you and for me. He said it not once, not twice, but over and over and over. Not that this money was going into the pockets of corporate executives or the shareholding class, which is the wealthiest class in America, but that the money was going to go to middle America. Now, what we've seen since this law passed was enormous share buybacks. And we'll talk a little bit more about share buybacks, but what share buybacks really are ways for companies to take this windfall, buy their own stock so that they can enrich the people who are shareholders in the company. That is the executives of the companies themselves, and that is, of course, the predominantly wealthy people who own stock. Now, Steve Mnuchin was recently confronted by this in front of a friendly crowd at the Mnuchin Institute. Did he say, gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't see this coming? Well, let's take a look at the exact clip, and we'll talk about it afterwards. I do warn you in advance that I will have to translate Mr. Mnuchin's words into English because he has an aversion to using English, apparently, when he is caught lying to the American people. But let us take a look at this clip. Maria Bartiromo, who some people will remember from her days hosting a financial program, I don't know what she's doing now, to be honest, asked him a question. Let's hear the question and the answer.
Is business reacting the way you wanted? Yes, we've got all of those bonuses, but they're buying back a lot of stock, not necessarily hiring all of the people that perhaps we thought. Is that a fair statement?
No.
Okay.
So the one thing I know this crowd gets, stock buybacks are a mechanism that companies can return capital to shareholders. You can have dividends, you can have share buybacks. There are two ways to return capital. If a company has excess capital, they return that capital to shareholders. This group recycles that capital through the economy. It doesn't disappear. So there's nothing wrong with stock buybacks. That's not a bad thing.
Okay, let us translate Steve Mnuchin's words into English. He now says that the money, the billions that are flowing back, the hundreds of billions that are flowing back to American corporations as a result of this cushy tax deal for the rich, this tax scam, he now says that the companies treat that as excess capital. In other words, extra money, free money. They don't need it, so they're not going to invest it in jobs for you and me. They are going to take this free money, this extra capital, and they're going to just hand it out to their shareholders and their executives, that is to say, to themselves. But, says Steve Mnuchin, it doesn't disappear, quote unquote, so that's not a bad thing. Now, it doesn't, you know what Steve Mnuchin is really doing here? He's trying to sell us once again on trickle-down economics. He's saying they're going to get, all these rich people are going to get that money, but don't worry, because then it's going to kind of still be in the economy and we'll all still benefit. Well, you know, that trickle-down economics has been disproved over and over and over again. The wealthy in this country have already gotten one huge tax break, not to mention the ones they got under George W. Bush. They're already sitting on excess cash that they don't know what to do with. They're not investing it either. So that money, they're not even spending it. They have too much cash, the ultra-rich in this country. So, and we should have known, in fact, we did know, that this is exactly what was going to happen, because Standard & Poor's, which is not exactly a rich person, a people's liberation company, said wealth inequality in the U.S. isn't just for individuals. The divide between the haves and have-nots continues to widen for American companies too. We always knew they were going to keep this money. We always knew this money was going to benefit the wealthy and not us. So Steve Mnuchin and Donald Trump told the American people lies about the jobs that would create, lies about the wage increases that we would see, knowing all along that they were enriching ourselves. You know what? Don't trickle down on our heads and tell us it's raining.